They're trying to meet a metric that technology doesn't directly serve. But once we hit the construction side, that's when technology is very helpful to get us to meet that metric. So I almost wonder if there's a way to tie the two together directly, but I just haven't seen it yet.
And that's why we're here. That's part of the reason why Melvin is always joining these discussions, because he has a long history of finding technological solutions for people inside and outside of the industry, and actually mostly outside of the industry. But I think his fresh perspective is always really helpful. There's a number of people in the blockchain space as well, including myself and Marcus. Melvin's actually who we lean on. So we're always thinking, is that something that we can scratch that itch with? But it's not always the proper solution. So yeah, we explore a lot here for sure. Welcome to the room. I'm going to actually just kind of set up the room here really quickly. I'm Brittanie Campbell-Turner. I'm the CEO and founder of Constructor. That's Construct double R. And um, what is it now? 6 years ago, I started a podcast to figure out, which is really, really connected to this topic. Why are we doing things wrong in this industry? Who's doing it right? And so I started down this path of interviewing people who are doing things in innovative ways that actually showed progress, showed success. Um, and it's brought us to a long journey, but a really incredible one where we've met a bunch of amazing people, and it's stemmed into this clubhouse community as well. And so we're wanting to foster conversations in this prop tech club, around how do we do things um, in a mindset that is improved. It's not just always process. It's not just always technology. A lot of the time, it starts with the foundation of culture. And so, yeah, that is something that I've come upon, and I'm always excited to talk about, especially from the owner's perspective. But I did want to share, we are being recorded. We are also streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And just to let you guys know that I'm really excited about this conversation. I think this is the second week we're having this conversation, but we have a couple people in the room that haven't been in the room, and I'm happy to host this conversation today alongside Melvin and Marcus. So, Melvin, would you give us a quick introduction and tell us what you'd like to learn out of the conversation today?
Brittany, love that introduction. Just for those of you who don't know how I met Brittany and Marcus, I actually met Brittany at a blockchain cryptocurrency talk in Chicago, and I was there when she said, "Hey, you want to start a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds like a good idea." And about a year or two later, Brittany had actually finally done it, and her Brittany and Marcus have just been incredible. The way they have been able to move around like the leaders in their space, the built environment space. And I'm saying their space because I didn't know anything about this environment before I met them. Six years ago, it wasn't a focus of mine, outside of my own private real estate investment and flipping and things like that. So it was cool to meet an architectural engineer and another electrical engineer who had experience in this space, and we're just there to geek out. So a little bit about myself: I am a software engineer by training, and I am a career consultant. So that makes me the perfect combination of rabble rouser and stickler. Take that however you will. But one of the things I love to hear is the problems that people are having, because it allows me to use a lot of the information that I just gather on a whim, or as a part of the work that I do. And my favorite thing in the world to do is connect people to solutions, connect people to other people who may have the answers that I may not have. And I just think that the world works better when we all work together. So without further ado, interested in hearing more about these problems, especially the one that Andrew mentioned, and I'm always taking notes and always available if you'd like to discuss further. I'm happy, to share whatever information I have, things that I might be pondering, as a way to perhaps seed your interest or your ability to touch on whatever solution might be right at the cusp. Thank you, Melvin.
Thanks, Melvin. Marcus, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, my name is Marcus Turner. I am one of the other halves of Constructor, as Brittany was mentioning earlier, and Melvin was alluding to. My interest is in shared risk, shared reward contracting models, and having us to contribute together and work in a collaborative manner. Ultimately, want to make work fun and gamify it so it's much more enjoyable in the long term.
Sweet. And we also, if you just refresh the page, we have Amar Riley who has joined the room as well, and he is our resident data source for pains in the industry at large, because he has done research in this space. So he always has excellent things to contribute to the conversation that is backed by data, unless it's just his opinion, which his opinion is always great too. So Amarilli, if you could just give a quick introduction if you're able.
Sure thing. Thank you, Brittany, Melvin, Marcus, and everyone up on the stage. Um, that was a good introduction, Brittany. I gotta give it to you. Um, I think the introduction that you gave, um, I'll probably add just one line to that is any problems. It's not always that you have to implement a new process or a new technology. At times, it's just the mindset. It's the culture of an organization that if you just change that, you see that domino ripple effect, and and it's actually better if it comes from the top. If it's a top-down approach, that's that's just that's the best. That's the best thing that can happen is a change coming from top till the bottom of that organization. So I think that pretty much sums it up. Um, how things could a different perspective of how problems or issues could be resolved. But coming to the topic of this room, I think, and there's so much to talk about. I was just, I don't want to get into the details of it, but I was just reviewing a paper today that was talking about how the knowledge in any organization is sort of lost. Which is sort of, in very technical terms, is known as implicit knowledge, not the tacit knowledge, not the technical knowledge, but the knowledge that you gain while you're on the project. And when you lose that, because these people who are working day in and day out on projects, they know the the issues that occur on a project, and once that's lost, it sort of goes back to Brittany what you were saying. No process, no tool can change that or make that change happen in a favorable manner once that knowledge is lost. So that sort of adds to their problems, and this is how you sort of tap in the knowledge for organizations to prosper. And I'll stop there. I'll be more than happy to chip in.
Thanks, Amarelli, and I appreciate how you get your workout in simultaneously while on Clubhouse. I always appreciate that. Um, all right, so we have a few people on the stage. Maureen, Adam. Maureen, if you could introduce yourself and let us know if you have a comment or a challenge for us to review today. I know you always have awesome comments here.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's Maureen Mascaro. I am an owner's rep project management firm based out of South Florida. I primarily do a lot of commercial interior renovations for my clients, where I help them with selecting the architect and the GC and every other vendor. But my clientele has been shifting quite significantly recently to high net worth individual residential projects. And so, those are two very different types of projects and different types of clients and different worlds of vendors and levels of GCs from commercial to residential. And so the topic that you've written out here, that the owner caused construction pains, is something that's really relevant and different in those two different worlds. And so I'm really curious to kind of listen and learn and hear what other people are chiming in with, and if we get into any specifics on what those owner caused pain points are. And of course, I'm always really endlessly interested in how we can better utilize technology. Just love all the rooms that you host, Brittany. So I don't have any specific questions, but happy to also chime in with any case studies that I can think of as we go.
Excellent. We're looking forward to that, Maureen. Andrew, I know you chimed in a little bit earlier. So we just want to acknowledge you. You are a real estate agent and commercial real estate developer. And you were asking a little bit before we kind of kicked off live what the whole room was about. So thank you for that contribution. Adam, would you introduce yourself and let us know what you have to say?
Thank you, Miss Brittany. I appreciate that. Love the rooms. Love the name, right? I named a company. It's very similar to that. Construction ache, because it is so painful. It is so, it's tough. But not just on us as like managers. Like, think about the workers that we have out there with working without clarity. People, not really making it easy on them, right? Not bringing the work to the worker, but making the worker kind of twist to the work. And so, I guess you asked me to introduce myself. I'm Adam. I've been, I was a plumber for my first 3 years, and then I've been in construction management for a couple multi-billion-dollar companies for the last 20 years. Building on-site kind of office engineer, project management, project executive, director, etc. Now I'm kind of operations innovation / starting my own coaching construction business. And so, and it is aches and pains because it's painful. And I love the conversation, and I love Melvin's contribution of, hey, we just want to know so we can solve it. Like that's the reason, not like this isn't a venting session, right? Like, let's bring some real problems here and solve them. My challenge for this room is to, and I mean this in the most respect, look at ourselves in the mirror and understand our processes and how clear we're making things down the value chain, right? Yeah, Brittany, you said earlier some owners are tough to work with, or I don't remember how you put it, but it was like, hey, sometimes the owners do make it painful. Well, everybody along the value chain makes it painful because we row in a lot of different directions. And so when that whole, when the owner, the client can talk to the tradespeople, the craftspeople, and tell them like, hey, these are the things I'm looking for, and we can manage expectations, and it's a lot easier that way. So anyways, I love the room title. Thank you for allowing me the platform, and I just enjoy y'all's presence and look forward to the conversation here. I'm Adam. I yield the floor.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. Lewis, welcome to the room. Love to hear from you. We haven't really kicked off the conversation per se. Typically, I'm asking, what is an example that you've experienced where either you've been the owner that's caused the problem? And speaking, I'm letting you guys know I'm an owner that causes problems. And I was an owner's rep for most of my career that caused problems, whether or not I wanted to or want to. It still happens, and this is a place to solve them, right? Like, just like Adam said, just like Melvin said. So Lewis, as you come up on stage, bear that in mind. We're wanting to hear true examples and dive right into solution making. And it's okay to get into the details if you're able to. So Lewis, please introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Brittany, for bringing me on stage. I'm always glad to share experiences and listen to experiences of others in this field. I'm a licensed general contractor in Georgia, and I mainly do state, municipal, and federal government projects. I am my company is a service disabled veteran owned small business and hub zone and other certifications. So that's kind of why I play in that space. And then, once I accumulate a little bit of money, I also do some real estate investing, and in those cases, I am the owner, and I mainly focus on buying some commercial properties that I can um, um, reutilize, for lack of better words. Buying properties, built in the 1970s and repurpose them is kind of something that I'm doing, some projects that I'm doing on my own. So one of the main challenges, some of the pains that I'm seeing as I'm bidding on government projects is I've been on a streak of me bidding and investing time and bidding on a few projects, and a couple of them have been canceled. And they get canceled the day that we submit, the proposal. So what I'm experiencing is that the government is putting out these solicitations, and we put out the proposals, and they get canceled. And the reason that they get canceled, I had one that got canceled because they did not get sufficient bidders on it. And the reason they didn't get sufficient bidders was that they made the scope of work like super complex and vague. And my assumption is that not a lot of people wanted to invest the time in it, and it was an asphalt IDIQ project. So there's a lot of demand in this area and so much work out there that paving companies did not want to invest the time in this. So they canceled that because of it. Another one that got canceled was in Miami, and it got canceled because uh, the VA or most of the government, they use a system called RS means, which is unit pricing a system, and the RS mean is not representative when you're using it for smaller projects. This was for renovating a clean room and a VA hospital. So it was like I will say somewhere around 800 square feet clean room. So when you try to use RS means for such a small room, well, it's not going to be representative of the of unit pricing is not going to be representative because the amount of time it takes to coordinate that it basically takes the same amount to coordinate $1,000 job than $100,000 job, and there's a lot of waste on these small projects, and the same amount of bureaucracy that happens in the VA happens in a small project or a large project. So when we put our number out, they kind of canceled it, and they came up with some excuse. So so we didn't protest, but um, the main reason was that because when we came with our number, they started saying that our price was too high and this and that, and then there's the cost of materials is high right now, so a lot of owners are not taking those increases into consideration. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing out there. There to summarize, owners are not writing detailed scope of work, and underestimation of the amount of funds that is going to take to perform the project, and in the current times. So that's what I have to share. My name is Luis, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Luis. I really appreciate your laying out those examples, and we're going to get into them because I think there's a lot there. But this is what I hear from you.
Help me.
it's like you need some help on the owner side, like somebody who's an advocate for 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 general contractors who understand what's actually going on in the market and can actually create some plans that are realistic or agile, right? Because of all the fluctuations that we have in the supply chain right now and cost, like there needs to be somebody who understands the market really, really well. Now, speaking as someone who has worked in public work, on the owner side as an owner's rep, I have some familiarity with what it looks like internally. Obviously, not through the pandemic, with all the supply chain challenges that we've had, but there are really competent people working in um, these spaces in government agencies. And then sometimes there are people who are really, really overloaded as well with work, and do not have the time to dedicate to really planning through a process that's really well thought out and going to work for the bidding process. So I'm not saying those as excuses, but I'm saying those as an observation that I've had. Um, the other thing that I'd like to say is when I was working for those public agencies, I was an owner's rep. So Maureen understands this well. You're brought in for your expertise to pull in outside data. Amirali also understands this. Um, but you're brought in early to guide the process and be able to mitigate the challenges before we get to them, as an owner's rep. And if you can have that internally, that is the best scenario for you to be in. But it's sometimes really challenging to get that perspective unless you have multiple projects going on. And it's challenging to have that perspective unless you're working with multiple clients that are experiencing different things because they have different expectations. So, really, really great examples. So what do you guys think about the bidding process that Luis
Uh,
talked about? There's so much there. I'd love to hear what went wrong, like what people's perspectives are of what went wrong based on Luis's first example. And I mean, I suppose we can jump into the VA as well.
So, in my past life, I was working for the past 5 years for various um, cities and state agencies, and primarily in their procurement department. We're trying to help them implement best practices on how to procure, how to write better scope of work. And Luis, that's one of the complaints that I hear it is owners, especially when it comes from um, um, government agencies or government organizations, not that well laid out. I completely hear you. I'm amazed that you did not point out uh, the the lack of transparency there
Mm.
when it comes to in terms of project cost, because that's one thing that we've heard from vendors time and again is that we don't know the project cost yet. The scope which is laid out asks for moons and stars. So that's sort of another big issue. Definitely not a construction issue, but there's definitely an issue that vendors do face when they are in the bidding process. So that's one thing that we as a group tried to implement, tried to, um, and that was it's more changing or providing the project teams, different business units with the tools and the processes, but at the same time providing them with the training and the mindset to how to conduct better or best practices when they're going out for bid. Because one thing that's different from in a public space as compared to a private space is that these state or these government organizations, they are very much afraid of the protest that they might get if something doesn't go according to laws or regulations. So they all they want to do is avoid all of those, and that's why it's just more imperative for them to implement
Yeah,
those best
well,
practices?
let me say a little bit more about that story about the pavement. So first, it was set aside for service disabled vet. Then, after it was published, then they changed it to all small businesses. And typically, I only bid if it's service disabled vet. So they changed it. And the reason that they changed it was because then after they solicited, that's when they found out that there wasn't going to be enough bidders at service disabled vets. So that was a failure of market research right there. And then after they changed the due date like three times because they weren't getting like enough questions and participation for it, so they kind of changed it a couple of times. And they did like two site visits. We went to one of them. Yes, and then at the end, the day we submitted our bid, they canceled it that same day. After they saw that there wasn't enough bids. Um, and so that's how crazy it is. And in my past life, I was a contracting specialist, so I know the federal acquisition regulation up and down and all that stuff. But I've learned that sometimes it's just best to let it go and kind of build a relationship. Now that they took the solicitation off the table and that they canceled that, now is the time that I'm kind of working the back channels to, when they re-solicit it again, kind of put my spin into it. So that's what I had to say.
Great, Luis. Some of the questions that I have about this is number one, you mentioned it was an IDIQ. And I guess my question to you is there a typical pool of quote unquote pre qualified contractors that they're pulling from in order to bid out to in that IDIQ, in any IDIQ project? That's how it was when I was working at the Public Building Commission. So just asking for clarification on that.
Well, there's a lot of people registered with a bunch of NAICS codes that may be relevant to paving, but doesn't mean that they all going to bid. Anybody can register to do business with the government and put 100, NAICS codes in there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have past performance on there. But in reference to the past performance pool, yes, that is very limited because yeah, everybody can say that they can do a lot of things, but not a lot of people can actually perform it. So another reason I found out was that this was a follow-on contract, and the previous the incumbent, he was a service disabled veteran owned, and they were not really happy with his performance. So that was one of the other reasons as well why they took away the set aside, because they didn't want the incumbent to bid. So a lot of different things, going on with this.
That's really interesting. So, so I think that you hit on something very um, poignant. Not understanding there are two things there. There weren't an understanding of who would actually bid, and something like that could really have been circumvented by sending out an RFI right before you send out a bid. Like, do you have capacity from this time to this time in order to embark into this project? Do you have subcontractors who can fulfill this scope for asphalt work? And like maybe two or three other questions in order to just test the market to answer that question before they go out to bid in the first place, even with their IDIQ partners, if they have long-term agreements with the contractors that are um, that have performed with them previously or are pre-qualified. So I think it's thinking outside of the box as to how you can communicate, right? Like you do have to follow the rules, quote unquote, to make sure you're not giving too much information so that it's a fair shot for every contractor who's bidding. So, that's something that really could easily have been done as a procurement exercise just to test the market. The other thing that raises a red flag for me is if there was a contractor that did not perform well, by choosing to not bid out to them without communicating to that contractor that they are not fulfilling the needs and fulfilling the needs in order to continue work with them as an organization, and or even giving them KPI metrics for them to work back up to before they have the ability to contract for projects again. Like, that's something that could easily be written and is likely written in contract language for public work already that can be leveraged, whereby you don't have to bring your contractor pool, or you should say, you don't have to have a smaller contractor pool and exclude people from it. You really just keep people accountable to what you've already asked them to do to meet the requirements already. So I don't know the nuances, of course, but that's something that can be done, and can be done by maintaining good relationships while also holding to account the companies that are not performing as well. So, those are my thoughts. I'm curious as to other people's thoughts as to what they think also went wrong in either example, the asphalt example or the clean room example.
So in cases where there was a lack of information, so Brittany, you said you can send out an RFI at the early phase of the project. What we used to send out something called RFN, which was request for need. It's definitely, you won't find this in any textbook, by the way. It's something that we came up with. The philosophy, the ideology behind this was that we the client or the owner was essentially going out to um, the vendor community, because we philosophically we think that they are the expert and they know things better, and we don't. um, so we go out, we ask them for, hey, this is our initial scope of work, this is our initial targeted project cost, this is our initial project schedule, this is our current state, this is what we want as a future state, these are the assumptions that we've made, these are the project team that we've decided on. Now, can you come in and tell us if there are gaps, and fill those gap in for us? You know where we are right now. You know where we want to be in the future. You know our scope of work. You know our project team. Lay out a list of questions that you might ask, and it just gives them a better. It gives vendor a better chance to, because now they're aware of what the project is, and they can ask you more questions. Rather than just providing them with a paragraph of, hey, we're trying to do this, blah blah blah, if you have any questions, just come back to us and ask those. That's where it's sort of, there's a component of training of mindset that's needed, because you just don't need to train the owner, but you also need to train the vendor community, be it, and when I say vendors, it could be essentially any industry, not just limited to construction, because we never limited ourselves to construction. um, and train them in asking questions, train them in owner, appreciating the fact that they're not the expert. They might get some sort of rebuttals and opposition. It's good for the project, and eventually have them both sit in a room. And when I say both, I essentially mean any stakeholder and all stakeholders in a room, and hash things out so that the project can go smoothly. So that's what we used to do, and sort of we did see where we're trying to see how much that's affect um, in longer term, but we're definitely seeing short term effect of, in terms of client satisfaction. They're like, this is amazing, this is more smoother than any process that we've this this doesn't incur any animosity between parties, this doesn't start to feel like that we're hiding things from them, or we're asking them to assume things that are not there. It's more transparent. So these are the initial results and comments that we've got, empirically based. Long term, you're still in the process of analyzing it, but I'm pretty sure the long term effect would be as good as the short term ones.
Yeah, really excellent point. I have never heard the request for need, so I'm really happy to learn of that. What I have done in the past, and then what I'm Marcus mentioned, we're advocates for collaborative contracting. Um, we certainly are. But we've before I go into detail about that, I just wanted to mention the two things that are very similar to what you just described, Amarali. A validation study. You can hire people to validate your scope and even define your scope, who are experts in the market. And then similarly, a a feasibility study. You can actually put it out to bid to get information back. And I say bid meaning request for a need or request for information to just get expertise, get valuable information. Or you can hire them on, literally hire them on for a couple months, um, and get some help to define the scope more clearly. So, um,
Hey,
awesome,
hey,
awesome.
Brittany, hey, Brittany, if I may add into that, I'm speaking towards government stuff because that's what I'm expertise in. But what happens, at least in the government sector, is that there is the requiring activity. So the requiring activity is the agency or the entity that needs that has a need, and they're not particular experts at all. They might be part of a unit or part of a section of the government or a sub agency, and they just say, hey, we just this thing looks ugly, and we need help. So they kind of build like a rough requirement package. It's not really defined on what is needed, and then they send it to a contracting specialist, and then a contracting specialist is the person that's supposed to do the market research, to go call out for industry, and they're not experts in any particular field neither. So then they send something called an RFI or a sources sought, and in that sources sought, they're not paying for expert advice. They just trying to test the market to see who's out there that can possibly do this job. And for people like me that know this industry, well, then that's where I take my opportunity to kind of ghost the requirement to try to push it in my direction. So a lot of the feedback that they get from this RFI, since it's not paid, they're just asking for advice from the market. Well, obviously my self-interest is to kind of limit as much competition I can from this opportunity. So when the requirement comes out through the RFQ or RFP, well then not as much competition is able to bid. So I might there's that's a very large topic to talk about, but the point that I'm trying to make is that at least in the government, the main issue is that you have multiple owners that are not expert in construction, and that the requirement is being defined by by contractors that have a self interest to limit competition. So that's kind of one of the main issues. And my name is Luis, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah, you're touching on something that is very, very interesting, Luis. I don't know why, Adam. I think you have a perspective on this. Adam, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Ms. Brittany, so I'm gonna be vulnerable with the team here, okay? I just discovered something this week. It's called failure demand. Is anybody familiar with that concept? Don't worry, I'll wait. Maybe flash a mic. Maybe flash a mic if you're not. I don't know. It's so hold on, let me
And
Google it because you are Marcus.
no, I'm not.
So Google says it's demand caused by a failure to do something or do something right for the customer. We all know the talk of who's the customer, right? We're all customers, not just the client or the owner. When when I hear, I guess our team talking, I really challenge us to look at the point of that failure. And more importantly, what is the demand on your time because of that failure? Like if I spill a box of Cheerios in the grocery store aisle, then I probably don't really care because I don't have to clean it up. I can just leave it and go. And that's the common theme or perception in construction. And so when you think about this, right, and extrapolate it into when I do something wrong and it causes me extra work, superfluous work, that's the pains that we're talking about. And so there's 4 types of processes as defined by failure demand. There's a my process, a you process, an our process, and a missing process. And so when we can, and I say this lightly because I don't like putting people into it. I like focusing on process, and you always analyze your own process first, right? It's very difficult. So to realize what I'm doing that's affecting the situation. What are those unintended consequences? I think, Brittanie, you alluded to those earlier, right? If I do this, then 5 other things happen, and all of a sudden something falls down on me. That's kind of that unintended consequence. And so, again, with all these examples, I guess let me just kind of pause there because I'm kind of out on a limb by myself here. I want to make sure that I'm making sense in the rooms with me. Can somebody give me an amen or shut up? Don't worry, I'll wait. That's an NBC thing, right? You know.
I mean, I think, Adam, what you're getting at is taking accountability for the parts that you play in any given scenario, and then making sure that you're communicating clearly as a team where everyone's taking ownership over their parts that affect not only your scopes of work and your schedule and your costs, but everyone else's as part of a collective team effort versus in silos. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, lightly, yes. Well, I agree with the logic. It's like, what is the failure that demanded your time, right? Like, what it's waste, right? Like, why? And there's superfluous waste, right? There's like, I bet let's take an RFI. We talked about RFIs earlier, right? How much of a project value do you think an RFI costs? RFI administration.
For the contractor or the owner?
For the project, all in.
Are you saying, okay, there? I think Luis has a valid question though. There's an RFI you could send out prior to even bidding for a project, or there's an RFI you can send to validate and understand or clarify that there's missing scope. So I guess you could still be asking the question either one, but just wanted to clarify the differences there.
I'm talking about an RFI after we've bought the job, right? Assuming we've bought the job right and we're looking for just information to get it done, right? No fishing, no change order, like none of the what designers or owners might think a contractor is in it for the wrong reasons, but and all I'm talking about is just the administration costs to process an RFI. That's it. So the PM to write it, the follow up, the architect to answer it, the owner to, like, what is that of a % of a project value?
It depends.
6% is the number that I have of a project value, with the understanding that there's roughly 20 RFIs per $1 million on a project.
And that's taken into account, Adam. Does that take into account the time that people are spending as well?
That's the majority, yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it. So the administration costs, whether it's, say, we're paying for programs or technology or emails or time for people to follow up and engineer or hire this or like, just the administration costs. Like, think about that. Think about like people that have wrong paychecks, right? When we look at points of failure and really analyze the process, right? So identify that point and then say, whose process was this point in? and not just like to blame the who, but to say what in that process do we need to change or what's not working. Again, this is kind of a systems thinking approach to this thing, and don't want to confuse the room because I've got a book that was referenced to me, and I'm going to dive in deeper. I just wanted to kind of toss it out there and trying to understand, like, how do we find the failures that are demanding our time where it should be spent elsewhere. I'm Adam. I'll yield it back.
I would like to say, at least in the government sector, that part of that has to do with deciding the type of contract that you choose from the first place. Because if terms and scope of work is clearly defined, this is something we've done before. There's many different projects. There's a lot of market research on it and previous projects. Well, then a firm fixed price is what's called. But on a project that we're consistently doing RFIs and consistently have to, is more of an exploration because we never done this before. Well, then, in order to justify our time, well, then it's valuable to have like a time and T&M, a time and material type contract or some other type of contract that is not firm fixed price. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, Luis, respectfully, I mean, there's so if you know a job and we get better by experience, okay, I agree with you. But I'm telling you on average, and this, what I'm saying is much bigger than RFIs. In fact, I could care less if we talked about RFIs. I hate them anyway, because I feel like owners and engineers think we weaponize them when we don't. We're just trying to figure out what the hell you want us to build. Which is why when somebody mentioned, hey, getting everybody in the same room together is a fantastic approach. Get the owner, the architect, the engineer, the project managers, the builders, the foreman, the crew leads. Like, let's talk about the expectations, as we said earlier. But this thing is much bigger than RFIs, right? So you have waste, and we usually talk about the 8 forms of waste. But in this example of what I'm talking about with failure demand, there's really 3 types. There's incidental waste, which is non-value added, but it's necessary. There's do-over waste, like I'm coming back to fix something. And then there's superfluous waste, like waste that doesn't contribute any value to the client, nor directly supports doing the do-over. So again, I encourage us, like, even like, let's talk about receipts and the superfluous work that's created when we don't just do our receipts right away, and a receipt fades away, or that's tucked in an email in a folder somewhere. We don't put them in, like, holy cow, the time spent going and chasing receipts. Or I mean, insert your example here. Again, I'm trying to understand what is a failure that demands my time right now. And again, so maybe the failure is the design wasn't complete, and so now I have to write an RFI. Or maybe the failure was I'm a dumbass and I didn't understand how to read that detail, and so I wrote an RFI that didn't have to be written, right? Like, it happens. And I created superfluous work, not just for myself, but others as well. So again, I'll report back, I guess, after I continue to dive in here, but much bigger than just like talking about RFIs, but it's identifying the failure demand and then really understanding, like, the process at which point this and who has control over fixing the future. So I'll report back in a couple weeks.
Please do, Adam. Melvin, I know you're typically close. You're usually right on the hour mark, more or less. So I wanted to get your perspective on the discussion because we've talked about the pain of procurement, and because you're kind of listening from an objective perspective, curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, no, when I start to hear these, thanks, Brittany, by the way, and thanks, Adam, as well, for taking so much time. Same, Amirali, Lewis, especially, with the real life, examples. Yeah, when I hear these, I hear a supply chain problem. And Brittany, I know you and Marcus have heard this a million times, but it's weird that, like, for whatever reason, like, the supply chain problem is like the universal problem that we're all solving at any given point. And as far as I see the world, everything is, as far as what we're doing from a professional services perspective, is some kind of form of remediation or mitigation of information arbitrage. What I'm saying by that is somebody knows something somebody else doesn't. And you're trying to, put the right money on the table to get people to align and come together to close those gaps. Now, sometimes some people win, some people lose, right? And I'm still hearing the same, problem here. But what we're all trying to do is figure out how do we all lose less, right? And so in this particular instance, I was writing down some notes. I was like, okay, so we've had, requests for need, requests for proposal, requests for information, right? And then each party feels a certain way about what it is that is being presented, right? And so what it feels like is that there's a lack of transparency, right, between all of those components, and those components don't seem to be used together consistently, right? And so I believe that's why Amirali, came up with, his, I guess patent pending request for need, right, which is a way to get everybody together to, in a very, and I don't mean this in a bad way, brute force way, right, without technology, align all of the interests and assumptions, right, at the same time, so that people can figure out where they sit, where they can figure out their part in the equation. I have a similar example, and I think a lot of this has to do with, again, back to how much money is available to distribute around the table of people who are brought in to solve an information problem. So I've been working on a problem with a real property tax team, right? And one of the things that we're building for them is a solution that allows them to update jurisdictional information once and then distribute that, to all of our third-party, vendors that need that data, or to consume all of the third-party data and the tax assessor data from, all these different, counties and states and whatnot in one spot, so that at any given point, the person who is on point to go and have that conversation with the tax assessor and the, attempt and appeals of certain properties has all that information in one spot, one dossier, right? So that they can make an informed, decision on which properties they'll go after for appeals or not. So in this particular case, all of the incentives were aligned for, the folks who were attempting to build their best case, right? Um, I don't know, whether or not, the states feel as though their best, interests are aligned in, the fact that, now these folks have so much data to bring to the table, whereas, they may be ill-equipped to properly digest, the argument or the request for appeals. But what I can imagine is that at the end of the day, they have enough data where they won't get in trouble, right, if they grant an appeals. And so in one way, their job is done for them, in some sense, so that, you're protected at least by, the amount of evidence that was provided. Um, Similarly, when you look at the third party vendors who are involved, um, I'm sure they would want to know, how, we are curating that data, and would want to be able to use it. But at this point in the relationship, there's only a transparent business agreement between one of them, right? And so, what are we saying here? Like, are we going for a win-lose strategy, or are we going for a win-win strategy? What are we going for? Like, what would be fair, right? And so, just like we have, the same, you know, uh, scenarios in tax and tax property, it sounds like you guys have the same set of problems when, trying to align the right resources to properly go after work that's been put out in a public way. Still both, interfaces with private and public, but ultimately, just a supply chain problem with information being available to some and not available to others, and some people liking it that way, right? And so uh, there needs to be a broader, more altruistic um, endeavor, right? That is placed above those, desires to use the lack of information on one side for that person's advantage. Now, how do you get there? that goes almost back to what we were attempting to solve with how do you evaluate a person the right way. And then Amarala, I mentioned in the last conversation, how do you get the project personality right?
I was just about to say that. That's the reason why emotionality. That's one of the reasons why emotionality quotient just becomes so much necessary in the projects, because um, you know all of you cannot be altruistic. Not these are a lot of times you feel like you're born with these traits, but most of the times you acquire these from the surrounding, and there's a way to change it. It's not that if you're less altruistic you're gonna die less altruistic. It's something that's very dynamic. It's not static, so those could be changed, and that's Melvin, to your point. That's why it just becomes much more important for people to assess the emotionality quotients of the personality traits of not just the individual, but as a holistic team. Because when you're working with a team, your attitude sort of changes. So the team emotionality quotient has to be also in favorable, um, in the favorable spectrum in order to perform better. And there's more to that, but I'll probably just leave it to that.
Love that, Amarali. Love that. Yeah, and then the other observation that I have in there, I heard one person say that, Lewis, I believe it was you. They had not done their market analysis to know if there was enough um, competition in the marketplace to properly bid, the work to that target, group of providers. And so you would have to ask yourself, is that a form of waste, right? Because you haven't necessarily wasted your time by not doing the research, but you certainly have wasted everyone else's time by causing them to um, uh, either apply or look at that information and realize that, oh, that's not for me, when maybe on a second or third pass after you've corrected it, they now realize that it is for them. And so, like, what kind of residual waste have you caused by having poor presentation of the information, which is something that I think, if we had a sheet and we could start to write some of these down, which I'm totally, I'm all for it. If you guys ever want to connect outside of the clubhouse and get into a jam session or on some paper somewhere and write down some things, I'm happy to do it. I've done that over LinkedIn with some followers of this group, outside of these conversations. So I think it's cool to have working models of realization that follow these conversations, so we can say, okay, that's something that objectively we could do something about. We could put a process in place for, and if nothing else, once you have enough transparency, it starts to point the finger more accurately to where the root of some of your more persistent problems uh, show up. So that's it for me, as far as what I gathered from this conversation, and how I was thinking about technology as being a facilitator in that whole process. I think we just have to go ahead and pitch in with Amirali and help him launch a startup and just get active. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Melvin. Always appreciate your perspective here. Marcus Amirali, curious as to, well, I guess maybe what I should say is we're getting ready to wrap up. And we always appreciate those who are listening in. I see Omar, I see Alan, I see Alan, I see Stephanie and Keith in the room. So thank you so much. We are, like I said, we're getting ready to wrap up. I would like to know closing thoughts though. Marcus, would you mind kicking us off?
Some
Do we
of
have
this
to
I was
wrap up?
actually.
I mean,
Do
it's
we
it's.
have to? I mean, Amarelli, you can keep going. We can keep going
I
with
just
this
have
a little bit.
my.
But
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was, because I mean, amazing people with amazing minds, and that's and my brain starts the neurons there. It just starts bombarding with ideas. So I just have a couple of questions. These are probably very easy questions. Um, how many issues do you think exist in the entire construction industry? Is there a finite or an infinite amount of issues? So can I have a one by one answer? Like, is there like a finite amount of issues or infinite amount of issues?
Infinite, because I think creating problems every day um, that didn't exist the day before. But I do think that I am stubbornly optimistic in the fact that we're also finding solutions. So I hope that at least the number is staying close to the to the same number, because we're not only creating new problems, but we're also solving them. So that's my answer.
So by issues, I mean the nature of the issues, right? For instance, submitting a building permit at a very late stage on a project that could literally delay the entire project. So, Brittany, you think the nature of the issues do keep on changing, and they're infinite in nature. Basically, you just get more issues and you solve for it, and hence the cycle goes on, right? Okay. What about you, Melvin? What do you think?
I feel like, again, just because I've seen so many different patterns, it's by type definitely finite. That's just my opinion. But
That's my man.
again,
That's my man. Okay. What about you, Marcus?
Coming from a perspective of actually working in a nuclear facility, most of my issues were uh, came with the changing of the guard, and I feel that as more knowledge is lost, that these problems are going to grow. That's just my personal feeling and fear right now.
Got it. Adam?
Let's hear the question one more time, Amirali.
So the question is, are there finite or infinite amount of issues in the construction? I'm just in the construction
Yeah.
industry, and the nature of those issues are, they're by that I mean is each what's the probability of repetition of issues on projects after projects after projects, because that is sort of the like the bottleneck, right? That's the pain in the ass, for a like of better words.
So it, it's going to take machine learning and artificial intelligence a really, 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 really long time because there's always another one, and another one. Like it's infinite. Like you're never ever. But I had a guy calling sick because his dog got hit by a car, or I had a guy or a gal. Like infinite.
Okay,
Another one.
but basically the nature is a crew not showing up for work. The nature though remains the same, right? I mean, their cat could die or their dog ate their car. I mean, that could change, but the
So
nature
it
that
might be finite, but you might as well consider it infinite. Like, no,
gotcha.
good luck putting bounds around that.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. What about you, Lewis? And I'm getting somewhere. It's not something that I'm gonna just getting somewhere.
Yeah, I believe it is. There's infinite problems in construction, and I want it to stay that way because as a construction owner and a capitalist, the way I see it is, the more problems there is in an industry, well, then there's more opportunity to, generate profit. Industries that are super efficient, margins tend to be, low from my experience. So that's something that is attractive to me for the construction industry. And if construction ever becomes too automated and too efficient, I don't know if I will stay in the industry. My personal opinion.
And I just say I respectfully disagree with that, Louis. That from a respect for people perspective, I I am in 180-degree different opinion from you. Respectfully, again.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
that
respect that as well.
yeah, I think that that's why we have this space, right? Like to have this dialogue and understand perspective, right? And I appreciate the difference of perspectives that's in the room. I know Amirali is asking the question round robin, and I do want to welcome Don to the stage. Don, if you want to do a quick intro and then answer the question that Amirali asked.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Melvin and Lewis. My name's Don Bowden, and I've worked in the construction industry space. We were a pre-sale home builder, so we dealt with a lot of owners, and we dealt with them over the duration of their house being built. So it was definitely a major component of our business operations. And I guess the first thing I'd like to ask is how many issues are problems and how many are symptoms? We certainly found that if you didn't address the core problem, you ended up spending a lot of time addressing symptoms that happened over and over and over again because the core problem wasn't addressed and resolved. So I think there's a certain exercise at mitigating problems by making sure you're addressing the core problem versus the recurring symptom scenario. The other thing is how many problems can be addressed by being proactive versus reactive. In other words, being proactive is you take certain measures to prevent problems. Of course, I like to always use the classic case of our use of purchase orders, which I think in a lot of ways was a proactive exercise to avoid problems, but they were probably more symptoms of lack of definition and control on the front end before any work ever started. So that's my 2 cents. Glad to see everyone in the room today.
Well, thank you, Don. Thank you, and thank you everyone in the room. Now I'll get to the body of what I was talking about. So obviously there's sort of a you know there's definitely not a consensus, but there's definitely an opinion that there might be infinite and there might be finite. Finite being just me and Melvin, I guess. So why ask this question? So let's assume till this point, literally this second, all the construction projects that have occurred, right? If they were all logging the issues in their issue logs, each and every issue that came up. Now, don't want to get into the definition of what that issue might be, but it could be just a simple issue. It could be as simple as electricity not working at the office, and hence we couldn't work, or the net was down. As simple issues, those logged during the construction in the issue log. Hence, those would be finite. Obviously, not thinking about the future at the moment, but those would be finite. Now, I'm pretty sure when you analyze those finite amount of issues using the 80/20 rule, you can pick 20% of those issues which are heavily impacting the project. And in the next, so let's just say tomorrow, there's another construction project that starts up, and if that project uses all the data that was gathered with that information, with all the issues that were heavily impacting the project, I definitely feel that the end result of that project, just being very proactive on that 20% of those issues, would be phenomenal. They would end, once you multiply that across numerous construction projects, um, it just has a ripple effect, and each of those projects are now doing better. Coming to Brittanie and anyone who said infinite, it's just a matter of feeding in more data as the data gets available. And that's sort of where, Melvin, your thought process, or I think someone said in the group, of how machine learning could be trained in order to spit out that 20% of those issues again and again and again and again after every time interval, which would be impacting the construction project the most. So that was that's sort of my brain was going to. And sorry if I took so much time, Brittany. Now you probably can close the room. Thank you, guys.
I appreciate the question, Emerelli. I like the dialogue. I like the different perspectives on the question in the responses, because there's a fundamental thinking that one has to have when you're thinking about what what are problems, and how do you. Not everybody's thinking about how to solve them. People are thinking about leveraging them, and that's just, that is. I mean, Luis mentioned it, right? Like, that is how a lot of people operate, and um, that's how lots of businesses choose to um, make business for themselves, right? Leverage business for themselves. I do think that when you talk about categorically, um, Amirali, where the source of problems are coming from, and looking at the 80-20 rule here, there is definitely a. If we address the 20% that affects the 80% issue, 80% of issues on a project, we're going to fundamentally shift things. I do think that because there is new technology, because there is new ways of doing things always to be considered. When there is newness, when there is change, um, there is a problem that can stem from the change itself, from the unknown. And I think that as long as there's change, there will be the unknown number of problems. If you're stagnant, if you're not changing things, then I agree that that finite number will be upheld. But if we are making changes, I think it will have infinite. And I hope that, again, I'm the stubbornly optimistic one who thinks that people are making changes for the better and wanting to improve and find solutions for the problems. So, acknowledge, and I love the dialogue here. So, Marcus, I was asking you your thoughts here. Please share.
I love that Lewis threw a grenade. And I was loving to have a conversation about that, but that would have to be another room and an entirely different perspective. I would enjoy, especially Lewis, if you bring that topic up again for like Thursday. I don't know if I think you have visited Thursday morning rooms. And I think that would be a great topic. I am a rabble rouser, and from that perspective alone, one of the things I would challenge is that in the construction industry or the built environment industry, um, margins are pretty small. That's why a lot of teams do not have R&D budgets and try to or an R&D team. And when they do R&D, they try to build it out. They try to build it to a project instead of just having their own R&D in-house regulatory budget as far as going through that process. Anyway,
Well,
that was
yeah,
my thoughts
I
about
guess,
that.
yeah. I know in my world, since I do a lot of set aside work, service disabled vet, hub zone, soon to be 8A. So the amount of work that I have to do to make my margins is not as much as maybe in the commercial world, or residential. There's pretty good margins in residential as well, but it comes with a lot of pain. I will have to say.
Yeah, and that goes back to the symptoms and the problems that Don was mentioning, and Al Morale was alluding to as well, as far as using machine learning and being able to improve some of those efficiencies. Well, I just want to give it back to Morale, if he had any follow up or any more information off of that.
No, that was it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brittany, Melvin, Marcus, Don, Lewis, and everyone else in the room. I mean, I always enjoy these conversations, and it's even better when I'm not working out and I could listen and give all my attention to you guys. Thank you so much. And Lewis, by the way, you brought up an amazing perspective. I um, all the time I hear people from this side of the spectrum, where they want to solve problems and they think that they can profit off of that. And and probably you're on the other side of the problems where, or other side of the spectrum where problems is where you make profit off. So I think it's, at the end of the day, it's all about solving a problem in order to make money. Making money or whatever that physical um, goal is. So that, thank you for that too. Thank you for that.
All right, guys. I'm gonna round us up again. Oh man. Yeah.
Hey, Brittany, shout out to Michael, Alan, and Don. No offense to anybody else who just joined. Those are just folks that I know. I'm pretty new, so.
Thanks, Melvin. Yeah, man. I think this was an awesome conversation, and I think we need to keep it going. So, I think last week we decided we're going to be talking about this every week on Tuesdays because uncovering these pains, it gives again perspective, and from my perspective, like I mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, uh, perhaps there's a technological solution that we're not even thinking of. Maybe there's a process solution that we're not thinking of. Maybe there's a challenge, at least from my perspective as an owner, and other owners reps that we can be thinking of in order to um, really shift the way we're thinking about things, so that we can understand better the other perspectives in order to really take advantage of the expertise of the individuals that we're hiring. And I think that from my perspective, that's where we're gonna get the best value. Um, so yeah, just want to close it up. Does anybody have any final thoughts here?
Well, I might jump in and comment. I think this is a extremely important subject, and as an owner, I felt like that was my primary responsibility. I didn't actually do any of the normal operational stuff. I effectively looked at what problems there might be with the business or what potential problems there might be with the business. And that was really a lot of my focus. And so I think, and when you're an owner, the buck stops with you. You're the one that has to figure out how to make it work. And mitigating and addressing problems are certainly a critical component of that responsibility. So I think this is an important subject, and want to just make that comment. Thank you, Brittany.
Thanks, Don. Any other closing thoughts here, guys? All right. For those of you who are in the audience, please ping me, send me a message. If you're listening online, please send something in the chat here. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if there's any additional topics that you think we should be diving into. Would love to hear from you. Rose, I think this is the first time you're joining one of our rooms. Welcome, welcome. Omar, I think we've seen you in here before, so welcome, Alan, and Michael. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, you all have a wonderful Tuesday evening.